Hey everyone, I wanted to go over the new, exciting, and extremely surprising news that we had for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak on both the Nintendo Switch and on PC. And that's the fact that we have a brand new patch available into the game, version 12.0.1. This is the patch that we were expecting to drop in October. Surprisingly enough, I think it ended up being dropped a little bit earlier than people would have expected. We're expecting it probably in the 3rd or 4th week of the month, but no less, we ended up getting relatively early in the 2nd week. They provided a quick update on Twitter, first and foremost telling us just kind of some of the details that we're going to be able to see in this specific patch. They're addressing some save data corruption issues on the Nintendo Switch side of things regarding the guild cards, that it was an issue that we kind of knew about. They're also addressing the anomaly investigation, the corrupted anomaly investigation quest on the PC side of things. So there's going to be some things specifically we're going to go a little bit more in depth over specifically on that, and also a couple of separate patch notes as well. So there's a lot to go over specifically for patch version 12.0.1, which is now available onto your Nintendo Switch now. So if you haven't necessarily updated it already, make sure you do so. First and foremost, when it comes to the bug fixes and balance adjustments, they mentioned that on the Nintendo Switch, they fixed an issue causing the save data to increase when the augmented armor to the Vaunted Curious Crafter page on the guild card. Now, this was the weird save corruption issue going on the Nintendo Switch. We don't necessarily know just how widespread it actually was, since it wasn't a lot of people discussing just getting all this kind of issue on the Nintendo Switch. The Steam version of corrupted save data were more prominent, but of course, we don't necessarily know if that one has been addressed specifically for this type of same issue. They also mentioned on the patch notes that after looking into the issue caused by repeated input gestures and pose sets, we have adjusted the game to accept a maximum of 4 inputs per second in order to maintain lobby stability. And if you remember, about a week ago, I made a video that Capcom removed a rather popular feature, and that was the, of course, gesture spam in the lobby. Essentially, people were just kind of spamming and over spamming emotes and gestures in the lobby, and it ended up seeing that people were just getting crashed. Now what they're going to do is pretty much exactly what I suggested they should have done. I'm sure it wasn't too much of a surprise to developers, was to limit the amount of inputs per second in order for you to be able to not crash anyone else and for the data to stream through normally. How many inputs they were doing, it was too many per second. Obviously, that was causing issues. Now you can spam it up to 4 per second. I don't think that's going to be too much of a problem. 4 spams per second is going to be more than enough for you to do your little gesture dances that people were already doing without actually harming other players' experiences. When it comes to another patch notes, they mentioned that they fixed an issue causing an error to occur if you try to claim the Lost Codes Hunter Lair weapon pack 14 types all at once. So this is just pretty much something that was going to affect a very minority of the players who decided to purchase all entire 14 different types of layered Lost Code weapons. They also fixed an issue where the Great Source Chrome Heaven and Antique Machina GS and Lordly Death Trap would have influencers numbers on anomaly slots. This one is really interesting. Another thing that I've also seen people mention is that depending on the layered weapon you choose to have, specifically if you layer a weapon on top of another, you might have like longer distance attacks than it naturally would have. I believe I've seen that for like gun lances and lances, where like a poke is actually reaching further because you're like overlaying a weapon that is supposed to have like a longer visual look than they normally would. So maybe that's something that they're going to need to address as they're starting to look into pretty much anomaly slots and the layered options set. Another thing that they mentioned is that they fixed an issue causing risen camellios to behave differently for players with an anomaly research level below 100 and players with an anomaly research level 100 or higher. This one's really interesting, since it basically says that the behavior of a monster is specifically tied to the anomaly level. Technically, that's how anomaly quests are supposed to work, but Risen Camellios obviously does not have an anomaly quest investigation as of yet, and presumably it won't actually get one since it doesn't necessarily need one. So it's interesting that even that was causing issues for players, presumably making the level 100 post version of this anomaly Risen Camellios glitch or whatever, making it have perhaps be more aggressive and also have more health as well. They also mentioned that they're fixing an issue that caused Violet Mizuzune to keep going around in circles if the player uses Trick Toad under specific conditions during the Master Rank 6-star quest in Mysterious Pale Flame. This one's interesting since basically you could just have one Toad in that quest. You're only fighting it in that arena. So of course, this one is rather limited, but it's still interestingly enough. They also fixed an issue causing the game to crash if the player uses the equipment search function at the smithy or in the item box if they do not have the right to play Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. So base players of Rise were simply having an issue, the game would crash on them if they looked up equipment search for the smithy, but they didn't own Sunbreak. That one's fascinating. Amazing that they got through and they didn't notice that one before. They also mentioned that the game now no longer autosaves at the start of a cutscene. Now remember, you can stop like autosaves from happening by just simply toggling that off. I would actually highly suggest for people to do that, since you could just save at the end of a hunt. So if you end up getting like bad hunts back to back and you, for some reason you don't necessarily want to save, probably take, avoid, getting bad numbers in your guild card, if you will, if you don't necessarily want to tally those up. They also mentioned that players will no longer be able to accept unauthorized anomaly investigations at the quest counter. We're going to be discussing this a little bit further since they put out a separate note on that as well. Alongside that, they also mentioned that if the player joins an anomaly investigation via the join request, the quest is identified as unauthorized and the chat log message will now be displayed to notify the player of this fact. We're going to be talking about this in just a second as well. And lastly, on the Steam notes part of the bugged notes, they mentioned that they fixed the bug causing the game to crash when connecting to the Nahimic Audio Sound Utility software. So if you're using that Nahimic Audio option, of course, now that's been addressed. Now regarding the anomaly investigation thing that they addressed for the PC side of things, remember that this was not an issue on the Nintendo Switch as far as we can tell. Essentially what this was happening was that people were hosting quests with anomaly investigation monsters appearing that simply did not have an anomaly investigation quest, like for example anomaly Shagaru Magala for something along those lines, or anomaly Lucent Nargacuga was another example that I ended up seeing. Another one was that if you had like 9 failed states, if you failed, like if you ended up getting carded 9 separate times, you still wouldn't necessarily fail the quest or something along those lines. Another one was that monsters who do not appear in a specific area now would, because people modified the quest to be able to do that. So these are like all the type of quests that Capcom said you do not want to save those quests, you do not want to be able to engage in those quests. We're going to put out a patch on that. So this is the patch that's now addressing this. And they specifically mentioned that the filtering function for automatic identifying unauthorized quests has been expanded, preventing players from accepting such quests in the quest counter, as well as preventing other players from accepting such quests in the unlikely event that they can be found in the quest board. If the players join an unauthorized quest midway in the join request tab, a message will be displayed in chat recommending that you leave the quest. Remember that whenever you join an anomaly investigation quest, on the right side of the screen, you essentially get a notification telling you like, hey, this quest has like 3 fails. You are going to be hunting these monsters. This is the level of the quest. Now you're also going to be able to see one appearing there as well, telling you to basically leave said quest because that is probably a modded quest and you do not want to be dealing with that. They also mentioned that if you have any quests that may have not been authorized, please delete them without playing them, and at the present it's not possible for the possession of unauthorized quest to affect your save data. So they are at the very least confirming that is not going to, corrupt your save data if you have one of those quests, which is very good to know. They also mentioned that a separate issue causing the errors on the Nintendo Switch version crash will be fixed. We already went over that, and they thank you for your cooperation in making the gameplay experience as enjoyable as possible. So essentially what they're saying here is that they're going to give you a notification whenever you enter a quest that says this quest is bugged, is modified, you don't want to deal with this, you don't want to engage with this, therefore basically just don't do this quest, leave as soon as possible. Because remember, and I remind people about this every single time you actually finish a quest and you get a completion, you're going to make a copy of that quest saved in your log, about the 120 quests that you can save from the anomaly investigations. So you don't want to actually get a copy of a bugged quest, a modified quest. You don't want that because you're going to end up, passing that on to other people and it just kind of spreads around in that way. So you certainly don't want to do that. So that's pretty much all the patch notes that we have for version 12.0.1. They're also mentioning that it's version 12.0.1 on Steam as well, so I do want to make that clarification as well. I also want to touch upon the fact that we will most likely be seeing some data mining happening regarding this patch for some of the monsters that aforementioned monsters that I spoke about a couple of days ago as well. I put out a video on that. It's doing amazing numbers. People are very positive on some of the stuff that they heard in that video, so most likely some more details are going to trickle out regarding this in the next few days. I'm going to be covering that as soon as I get, of course, complete confirmation of any more details regarding what more clarifications we can get regarding patch 13.00, which by that point will be free title update number 3, happening presumably, and I think it will be, on November 30th. But that's about all the information that I have for you guys today. If you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up, and as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya!